What's a sign that someone is way smarter than they let on? Before we start, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. I wish you a pleasant viewing experience. Story 1, I agree with most of the replies here, but I'll add my 2 cents. I think people who meet you on your wavelength are smarter than most. They can talk about pretty much anything with anyone. They'll shoot the shit with some people, discuss politics with others, listen as well as talk, ask questions, but also will take time to explain things if they're asked. Story 2. It's actually interesting to see how many different views on intelligent people seem to have. If we talk about logic smart, then a subtle sign is worrying about obscure edge cases too much. Emotional smart, bringing up stuff that reassures other people before they bring it up. Story 3. People who are confident in admitting they don't know something, often by saying they don't know or I don't know when asked a direct question. People who can clearly define the boundaries of their own intelligence, are humble and learn by making mistakes, and usually, not all the time, are more intelligent than those who lie, mask, use excuses, or become defensive about what they perceive as a mental deficiency. Story 4. Good comedy. There are so many great comedians who play dumb and make jokes about how stupid they are, but I think you have to be quite above average intelligence in order to be a really great comedian. Story 5. Rather than getting frustrated when they don't know something, they get excited. I had a chemistry professor in college that was insanely smart, and when somebody asked a question she couldn't answer, her eyes lit up as she said, "I don't know. Let's find out." To her, not knowing something was just an opportunity to learn something new. Story 6. People who realize they don't know everything, and intelligence comes in many forms. You are more likely to listen to people who are well-informed in different fields if you don't already think you have all the answers. This is how you learn. I think too many think being smart is something you're born with, like you just have a quick brain, but it's more about humble curiosity emo. Story 7. One little thing I've noticed is intelligent people tend to laugh at jokes faster than the average person because they got it right away rather than having to process it and figure out why it's funny, or laughing just because everyone else laughed. Story 8. Persistence is a great sign of intelligence. Curiosity is another great sign. Intelligence comes in many forms, so I would ignore all the comments suggesting that intelligent people keep their mouths shut, etc. Story 9. Taciturnity. Many quite smart people that I know are 90% taciturn. They don't want to share their thoughts in front of many people, but when you talk to them one-on-one, they share facts, knowledge, and thoughts, and you instantly think, wow, guy, I didn't expect from you that. Yes, in many ways, they are just introverts. Story 10. Being quiet. Note, this isn't always a telltale sign, but I've noticed usually the smartest people tend to keep their mouths shut while they watch how everyone else is going to screw up before they speak. Lowell. Story 11. Honestly, one of the most immediate signs of intelligence is controlling emotions, if you're looking for a more scientific answer. It's not to say emotionally unstable people can't be smart. There are lots of reasons people can be overly emotional. Hormones are a great example. But statistically, if someone is unable to control their anger or fear, more often means their prefrontal cortex is less well developed, which is also often the case for younger people, just because it doesn't develop as quickly as the part of your brain that actually houses emotion. So someone who can keep their emotions in check and be less reactionary in their responses, meaning they can pause, let the emotion fade, and then respond, often has a more developed logic process in their brain. Story 12. A while back, I was in a group of about 7 or 8 people discussing our mutual sport. At some point, the conversation shifted, and one guy brought up a complex riddle math problem he had heard before but never solved. With pen and paper, I might have been able to figure it out in half an hour or so. There was this one guy sitting in the corner, old shirt, dirty pants, messy hair. He hadn't said a word for a while, just sat there, staring blankly. After 5 to 10 minutes of silence, he suddenly spoke. He just said 2 numbers. Turns out that was the correct answer. He had solved the entire thing in his head while the rest of us had already moved on to other small talk, and he was probably still listening to that too. At that moment, everyone in the room knew, this guy is crazy smart. If anyone wants to try the problem, let me know, and I'll post it. Story 13. Dunning-Kruger demonstrates that the smarter you are, the more likely you are to express doubts about your own beliefs, your own knowledge, and your own intelligence. You are also more likely to overestimate the intelligence of other people. They also show that the dumber you are, the more likely you are to show confidence in your own beliefs, knowledge, and intelligence. You are also more likely to underestimate the intelligence of other people. In other words, the person saying, "You're all stupid," "I'm the smart one here" is more likely to be less intelligent than the one saying, "We're all intelligent people here. I might be wrong. What do you think?" In general, overconfidence is valued more than intelligence. That suggests that, in general, people prefer dumb shits. But I could be wrong. Right. Story 14. For me, it is your ability to ask insightful questions. During my PhD, I noticed that the really smart people could listen to a lecture on a topic that was tangential to their research and ask really insightful questions. I strove to be able to ask really good questions when presented with a topic that I was not an expert on that really pushed the lecturer on their knowledge or ideas. Story 15. A high IQ is supposed to be a sign of intelligence, but I test around 165 every time, and I am useless at everything, so life in general. I cannot concentrate on anything apart from work, and even then I am just working hard to stop my mind from wandering. I don't mean wandering. Also, I think you can just be good at IQ tests, and it is no guidance for anything at all. Story 16. I've found that highly intelligent people care little about demonstrating what they already know, and instead use their energy to seek out new knowledge. Throw two people into a conversation, and the smart one will do far more listening than talking. I've found that genuinely intelligent people care little about talking about themselves, and they are fiercely curious about the world around them. Story 17. Just a few of many different possibilities. A person who makes decisions that are perceived by many as strange, taking unconventional paths, seemingly descending the career ladder, and so on, communicate very differently with different people based on the person's understanding and abilities. Take a long time to make decisions as they consider all options much more thoroughly. People who come across as if they don't know anything about their field of knowledge, your now specialty, even though they know more than many others, but also know where the limits of their understanding are and also know how much they don't know. Story 18. I think it depends on what PPL define as smart, and there are different types of smart. I find PPL who are able to be open to PPL to be smart. I try to be open and inviting and find it hard AF. Creating a community wherever you are is real smart in my book. PPL who do that usually are also very good at being subtle at it and also to not forget to ask about others and give thoughtful compliments in a smooth way. Story 19. Someone who's quiet and prefers to take a back seat during conversations. It means they're absorbing what's being said and carefully formulating a meaningful answer. Or they have terrible social anxiety and are scared of saying something stupid and being mocked until the end of eternity. But since I just described myself, we're going to say it's genius. Story 20. A client once referred to his brilliant young associate as having a very Japanese style in meetings. I thought it was a borderline offensive comment, but what he meant was that this person was never in a rush to speak, but would wait until the rest of us had blurted out our hot takes or opinions or whatever, and then say something extremely perceptive. But he had no need to dominate the discussion. Story 21. Someone who shares their thoughts starting with some version of, "It is my understanding that." My 11th grade history teacher was the first one I noticed this from. Everyone since that I've met who does this regularly has been brilliant, shows they are capable of considering other options and realize their perception is just one of many possible ones. Story 22. A good sense of humor. People that take shit too seriously come across as dumb to me. Some of smartest people I've ever known really know how to crack jokes and cut tension in a room. You know these high-level IQ, CQ combo folks when you see them. Of course, we all know IQ, only smart people that are too serious. Story 23. Being able to teach someone something in a simple way that someone uneducated and unintelligent could understand. It shows two things: a deep understanding of how it actually works, because they can break it down to its core and not rely on external knowledge. The ability to process quickly enough to reframe something in a way they wouldn't normally see it, which also links back to point 1. If they can't reframe it, they don't understand it well. Story 24. Really smart people will never tell you they are smart. They'll always deny it because smart realize that there's an infinite amount of knowledge out there. Even if you completely specialize in your field, there's a good chance you're still only grasping a small portion smart people realize that. Story 25. 1. Silence and the ability and preference for listening, watching, observation. The ability to mine through the crap of others to find some needle of knowledge that can be acquired. They don't write off others as not having at least one thing to learn from. 2. I don't know. 3. Funnily enough, in the research literature, it's swearing. Smarter people will swear more often and in a manner that will seem to others as excessive or crass. But if you take the time to listen, you'll notice the placement in the sentence is technical and allows the other's points to remain coherent. Tools used, not the message itself. 4. Using simple language. Pseudo-intelligence will be that guy we remember from class throwing around all the technical terms and jargon. The ability to relay complex information in a level appropriate to the person they are talking to, while retaining the nuance and gaps of knowledge. 5. The company they keep or the company they refuse to keep. 6. Love of failing. Through failure and being proven wrong, one learns. Actively trying to learn new things and make their worldview as unstable as possible. Science tells us what isn't true, not what is, and smart people function in a similar manner. 7. Love of philosophy and art and having a childish wonder. 8. Being able to separate opinion from fact and the willingness to demonstrate said separation to others rather than use the fact to support their subjective opinion. As Marx wrote, everything we see depends on how things are put. We all interpret facts through our ontology. There is no objective value-free interpretation of data, and they are not afraid to admit this. 9. Ability to say they were wrong. Story 26. Not sure if this is always the case, but there is a certain type of smart person who just seems constantly bemused, listens with a smile, with empathy, laughs softly to things that upset other people, and then suddenly asks a question, but otherwise doesn't talk much. When pressed to say something, they seem reluctant, then finally blurts out something very insightful and unexpected. Like they're an alien from outer space who just loves and feels bad for humans and is delighted by all forms and expressions of humans, not just reacting to everything in terms of bad and good, right and wrong. Story 27. Maybe not a complete fit for all knowledge bases, but I often find that the smartest people in particular fields are pretty aware of what they do not know. And they're usually quite curious towards trying to fill that knowledge gap. Story 28. They let you talk and finish your points, rarely opting to interrupt. Sometimes they won't respond at all, even if they know for a fact what just came out of your mouth could easily be disputed, either because they're emotionally intelligent enough to protect your pride, or because they think you simply wouldn't get it. TLDR, they let you yap. Story 29. A wise man can be confident, but he assumes he could be wrong. When things are important, he seeks opposition and differing viewpoints to ensure he's considering the most amount of experience possible, while also ensuring critical thinking is applied to validate new information and challenge his own opinions. We can be right and wrong simultaneously, but we should always assume we can be wrong and be prepared to prove with evidence why we are right. That being said, I'm drunk and arrogant as shit, and I love to argue. I hope for the right reasons. Story 30. Avoids having strong opinions, or any at all, on a topic without having sufficient knowledge. Furthermore, recognizing the limits of their knowledge. The person who thinks they are an expert at everything is an expert at none. Story 31. One big sign is when they just get things super fast, but don't make a big deal out of it. Like they'll pick up on stuff without much explanation, but they're not showing off about it. Another thing is they ask a lot of questions, not the usual ones, but deep ones that get you thinking. And they're super chill in conversations, not trying to dominate, but you can tell they've got a lot going on in their head. Oh, and they usually don't brag about what they know, kind of like they know the power of their brain, but just keep it low-key. Story 32. I've always found that those who continue learning actively throughout their lives to be not only my kind of people, but intelligent folks. I try to surround myself with people like that. Maybe their intelligence will rub off on me a little. The never-ending desire for more knowledge is something I've tried to add to my life. Story 33. They don't try to prove how smart they are. Like they know how to do a lot of things, but don't talk about it unless it's relevant. They listen and are good at explaining things when needed. They ask clarifying questions because they are interested in understanding what is being talked about. Story 34. People who are not desperate to belong to a group and adhere to groupthink, which is a remnant of evolution. People who don't understand the desire to identify with a football team full of strangers making obscene money for playing a game while they sit home on their couch and eat Cheetos. Yeah, you can enjoy the game, but when people's identities become dependent on their sports team, it is weak-minded. Same with politics and not caring about the truth or the issues, but only caring which side the politician is on. People like this are half the population, and they really look indistinguishable from chimps throwing feces. Story 35. People who are able to effectively reframe topics to match the people they're talking to. I've always been jealous of people who are able to explain things persuasively. In my opinion, social intelligence is the best kind of intelligence to have, just because we do a lot of talking. You can get by on just being smart in intellectual matters, but being able to communicate effectively is just so useful. Story 36. I once saw an interview with some who at the time was credited as being the most intelligent person in the world. The interviewer asked him how he managed interactions with stupid people. His answer was, "The only stupid people I have ever met were people who thought they knew everything. I have thought about this often over the years." Story 37. Their heads are like 12 feet tall with a lot of tubes and wires going in and out of it, and multiple digital interfaces are surrounding them. Displays changing at a pace our eyes can't keep up with, and the goddamn biggest big gulp you've ever seen in their pale, pudgy hands. Story 38. Asking deceptively simple questions. They probe deeper, making others think without revealing how much they already know. Letting others talk. They listen more than they speak, gathering info before weighing in, downplaying their intelligence. They avoid showing off and may even act clueless to disarm people. Picking up on details others miss, whether in conversations, patterns, or problems. They see things that fly over most heads. Explaining complex ideas simply. They don't use big words to sound smart. They make hard concepts easy to grasp. Adapting to different crowds. They can blend in with all kinds of people, adjusting their communication style effortlessly. Winning debates without arguing. They guide discussions subtly, making their points feel like common sense rather than a challenge. Being effortlessly creative, they connect unrelated ideas, problem solve on the fly, and think outside the box. Story 39. Drawing comparisons. This could be in terms of similes and metaphors, or it could be in going, "Oh, that sounds kind of like," when they're learning a new concept. The ability to graph together concepts and ideas and link them to other knowledge bases they have is a very, very functional kind of intelligence. Story 40. They usually come across as less arrogant and have a good sense of humor. Instead of boasting on about themselves and what they know, they ask questions and listen, having interest in learning. When you ask them questions, they can break complex topics down so the average person can understand them. Story 41. I don't get the "then they let on" lol. I don't think they conspire to hide it. You notice because they listen and ask really good questions. When they offer input, it's generally constructive. Sometimes they complicate things because their mind goes much further than others, often left being treated as the anomaly in the room, or dumb, just lost. It frustrates others and can leave the person feeling off point, not smarter. Hence my comment at "they let on." It can come out in ways they don't even intend, and they may feel weird, dumber than they are depending context. IQ isn't like they show in TV shows. It's not always recognized, welcomed, and celebrated. A lot of times it's also misunderstood and outcast. Ask Galileo lol, bet he wished he hit it lol. Story 42. They will genuinely listen to you and have a productive conversation rather than trying to win or prove how smart correct they are. They will critically engage with every topic and piece of information and won't be afraid to admit it when they're wrong or don't understand something. Because they respect that you never really stop learning, they're all about connecting with the world and developing a deeper understanding rather than controlling and dominating the conversations and everyone around them. Story 43. When they are always quiet, yet listening to the group and the only time they speak, it's something totally off the wall and out of the box, but it's the perfect sentence that fixes the problem or explains the situation. Then they just shut up and watch the group do what they said and slip back into being a fly on the wall. Story 44. The more you know about something, the more you find out how much you don't know. I always noticed how people who are starting a major are always so quick to point out and talk about all they know, whereas someone who has a master's or PhD are more likely to keep it to themselves and listen to information to what's coming in. In short, rookies will brag about how much they think they know. Masters will listen more than they talk. Story 45 allows others to complete tasks and struggle, and only providing advice or guidance when asked. This allows others to obtain the knowledge in a way that allows them to be successful and shares the wealth. Another big one for me is asking even the most junior people their thoughts and ideas without making them sound stupid. Even though you may have a better or more efficient way to complete the tasks, this allows others to feel confident in speaking up and doesn't make it seem like it's your way or the highway. Story 46, the ability to hold a conversation with anybody, regardless of the other person's intellectual capacity. If they're speaking with someone less intelligent, they know to meet them where they are and how to do so without reverting to banality. If they're speaking with someone more intelligent than they are curious and inquisitive. The point of communication is the exchange of ideas, and intelligent people will speak with that in mind. Story 47, emotional intelligence over just facts-based intelligence. Those who can understand differences in people and understand how people are feeling, and when they're acting with intent or in sex, and having patience for it all. Story 48, The smartest people I know spend a lot of time observing without commenting, just listening and watching. And a lot of them, if their mouths are moving, they're asking questions. Lots of questions until they understand something. They're also not afraid to say they don't know or understand something. Story 49, the way people introduce themselves. Just today, I meet a man at a party, and we started chit-chatting, so obviously I ask his line of work. He says he works in construction. I don't know much about construction, so we sort of move on to other topics. I figured he'd be a sort of bricklayer or plumber or something. Nothing wrong with that, BTW. Later on as we speak, I learn he's a civic engineer, and he designs literal highways and other large-scale operations. He manages teams of hundreds of other engineers and workers, and he describes his job as working in construction. To me, this kind of humility and self-awareness can only be found in people who have an extraordinarily high emotional intelligence. Good question, BTW. Story 50. It can be difficult to tell sometimes because intelligence takes so many different forms, and we are all strong in some areas and weak in others. Whether or not a person is formally educated has nothing to do with their cognitive abilities. Having a great intellect, in the traditional sense, is not actually very helpful for successfully navigating life because it often comes at the cost of social connectedness, which is where the real quality of our lives is generated. So, if you're using social capital as a measure, and I think you can, then a subtle indicator would be how strong and how vast their social and familial network is. Another indicator of elevated cognitive ability can be whether or not a person is musical, very funny, or both, although funny can also just be an indicator of a traumatic childhood, rather than just intellect. I don't know the specifics of this, but I know I have read that people who have been playing musical instruments since before the age of 8 will possess additional reasoning centers in their brain than people who didn't. They are usually better at both maths and at learning new languages. Story 51, I had an interesting life experience where my IQ and cognition in general dropped significantly for a year or two. Side effect of cancer that affects the brain. I felt much more insecure about how intelligent I really was. So I talked about past achievements more often and in a more obnoxious way. I showed off much more. I dwelled more on how I sounded and appeared to others, specifically how smart, clever, engaging. I was more threatened by other people's successes, whether it was in a friendly board game or in the professional world, and much more self-critical of any failure. I was also more easily panicked and angered by events that I didn't fully understand, and more susceptible to propaganda that tried to make me angry or outraged. I didn't realize the extent of what was happening to me. I had cancer for about 7 years, a quite rare slow-growing type, and I only realized how strong the cognitive effects had been during the months after I became cancer-free. My memory improved, my ability to gauge when a joke was funny and appropriate was much better. I became kinder and more emotionally intelligent again. My quickness in conversation was back to where it used to be, and I felt much more confident and unthreatened by others' success and intelligence. I would say that all of these qualities are typical of people who are intelligent and secure in their own abilities. Experiencing what was essentially a window into dementia has affected me deeply. I have more empathy towards people who feel insecure about their own intelligence. To me, it felt like I was floundering and almost drowning constantly. And of course, I was more easily angered and panicked in that situation. I felt like I was always trying to cover up and redirect people from thinking I was stupid, which ironically made me come off as very insecure and off-putting. I'm also more grateful every day for the intelligence I have, and don't feel dissatisfied or self-critical nearly as often, and usually catch myself when I do. I know how incredibly lucky I am to be able to come back from lowered cognitive ability. I'm able to just be as intelligent as I am, without needing to prove it over and over again to myself and everyone around me. When I meet someone else like that, to me, it's a sign of both mental and emotional intelligence. That is all. Story 52. They know the rules of the floor. They know to wait and listen in a conversation before taking the floor with something to say that advances the conversation. They get to the point and then cede the floor to someone else by asking them their opinion on what's being discussed without putting them on the spot. Story 53. A big one I've noted is not claiming too much. They'll caveat their answers by saying such things as, most of the time, broadly speaking, I'm generalizing here, shows awareness that it's extremely difficult to make a comprehensive statement, and most things are usually easier to prove when you're not going for the always clause. Conversely, people who make sweeping statements and won't back down when challenged, really, all of X is Y, are usually pretty dumb, or at least willfully ignorant. Oh, and curiosity. Story 54. I have a feeling most answers I hear are coming from people who think they are the person in question. Best answers I've heard are, there are many different ways people are smart, but I have met a handful of people who I would consider extremely intelligent, and they don't often fall into the traditional stereotype or having any sort of success in life, unfortunately. The most successful people I know definitely do not intersect much with the smartest. I'm not a genius, but I don't consider myself a complete. I believe a high majority of people, if asked, would say the same. But I've met some people who actually seem to believe they are stupid when in reality are actually way more intelligent. Also, I know very intelligent, manipulative people who are so far ahead on both scales that it's sick. On the other hand, I know extremely intelligent individuals who fail because of their extreme emotional intelligence and empathy and become addicted to drugs or KTS, but are just crazy smart people, IDK. Story 55. I see a lot of answers here that are straight up signs people are smart. Signs people are smarter than they let on is different. I think one good sign is when they don't chase down arguments in social situations when someone asserts something nonsensical, but just say something like, oh, well, that's a different way of thinking about it, and move on. Story 56, it's the quickness of their reasoning and curiosity. Not that they ask questions about you or seem to be interested. That's not a sign of curiosity. That is a sign of well-rehearsed communication skills. A curious person is continuously learning. If they hear a new word, they look it up so they can incorporate it into their vocabulary correctly. If you mention where you are from or what you do, they'll likely know something about it to ask about, which they gathered through their curious life of learning. Smart people also usually speak quickly because their brains move fast. But even if they've practiced slowing down, the conversation still moves quickly because they grasp things and can move on to the next thought without delay. Story 57. The more you know, the less you know. Whenever I speak to an intelligent person about something they know about, they always say, I'm not an expert on this, but here's what I say. As opposed to someone who may be less intelligent would say, believe me when I tell you this is how it is. But Story 58. Some traits like introversion, curiosity, agreeableness, conscientiousness, etc. might be correlated with high intelligence, but I don't think they necessarily indicate it. Those traits seem more like stereotypes of smart people. In my opinion, quick learning is the most noticeable sign of genuine high intelligence. Story 59. They can entertain two seemingly contradictory ideas at the same time, rather than leaning into black and white thinking. This seems to be derived from the curiosity mentioned in other comments. Instead of settling with whichever seems simpler, they have the curiosity to ask whether a third option may explain the disconnect between the two ideas. For example, that story that went around about a professor holding up a book of one color and insisting it was another, then flipping it around to show the back was a different color. They may be more likely to ask questions to understand the difference in opinion instead of assuming they have the sum total of all information needed to decide. Story 60. The more knowledgeable someone is on a subject, the more they know that they don't know, so they're more upfront about what they don't know. The person who confidently says they know everything usually knows just enough to be dangerous because they don't know enough to know what they don't know. Story 61. Have you ever watched Theo Von? It's clear if you watch his podcast, which is hilarious, that the dumb is an act. He'll come out with some quick quip that would take a normal person 5 minutes to come up with in seconds. When the people he has in the show ask about some historical reference, he'll know what it is, and on and on. He's definitely so good at playing in that he must actually be a genius. Story 62. While you are talking to them, are they paying attention, not interrupting? Then do they wait a second before speaking? That generally means to me that they are actively listening and processing information. Active listening seems rare to me. Our brains are so busy concocting an instant answer to what the other person is saying that we tend to miss important pieces of information. Someone who has learned to control their impulse to talk is, to me, the sign of self-awareness and consideration of others. Story 63, curiosity and silence. They listen to what you say, and then they ask questions. They don't feel the need to show the world how smart they are. I also find that intelligent people can have a discussion about something they don't agree with without losing their mind. Story 64, people who can entertain different ideas without internalizing and accepting them. Often it's difficult to discuss difficult topics without the lesser intelligent person becoming emotional and rejecting the opposition personally rather than rejecting the ideas themselves and keeping the person separate from the theoretical. Story 65. There's being smart and being experienced, and both things show signs that can lead you to believe it's either. But if you're just looking for smarts, then you'd be looking for knowledge base, problem-solving skills, etc., etc. Someone who is smart because of their experience is usually aware of things that could fault something, cause an issue, think ahead, have clear situational awareness. Story 66. Instead of ordering the expensive item at the Taco Bell menu, they can go to the kiosk and know how to find the value item version and add the appropriate ingredients to mimic the high-priced item at a fraction of the cost. I believe Albert Einstein was the first to do it, which is why you always refer to someone smart as the next Einstein. Story 67. In my opinion and experience, the more intelligent a person is, the better pattern recognition they have, which ties into the ability to think in an abstract way. They usually need little to work with because experience in other areas can be used even though it's seemingly not relevant. Simply said, they're able to easily connect dots and pick up new things because they extract more out of very experience, bit of information, and observation. Story 68. They may tell you how they do something or why, but not both. Then there is that little wait-and-see smile. Pay attention to that smile. They see it coming and are perfectly happy to let you around. Saw it from journeymen when I was a plumber's assistant. Saw it from top-performing managers in tech. Saw it from engineers, admin assistants, hotel clerks, and so many more. Many smart people tired of explaining and proving themselves, so they will be happy to help, but also enjoy watching you find out if you don't follow up with your own questions. Story 69. My husband, though he can be a really clueless sometimes, several times when he talks about things, people would give me a side glance of both awe and confusion. They get the general idea of what he is talking about, but the level is so above where their brain or mind can go. I am not the same level or type of intelligence that he is, but never feel like less, just different. He has no idea that people see him this way and is incredibly critical of himself in many ways. Story 70. There is a lot of great answers here illustrating different types of intelligence, and they are all equally right. But I think the greatest quality of a generally intelligent person is the self-awareness to know what they don't know and the humility to admit when they were wrong. You cannot learn anything if you think you already know it all. Story 71. So smart is a tricky thing to pin down, but emo, when they seem to learn new information and understand it quickly and easily, that's more or less the essence of IQ emo. As a teacher, I've come to see IQ as a measure of learning efficiency. Kids with high IQs tend to connect new information to background knowledge more effortlessly, and that frees up working memory to play with the information to discover and innovate. Story 72. Consideration. Not appeasement, but true consideration. It may not seem like it, but it requires fairly deep thinking ahead, and good awareness while not boasting about it. In fact, actively trying to avoid boasting, obviously as consideration would almost require it to be that way. So yeah, it is often that truly considerate people are smarter than they let on, emo. Other good answers here show people are smart, but not necessarily smarter than they let on. Story 73, they let others talk more. Being a listener is a power move that can be disguised as humility because it allows them to gather information, understand people's motivations, and control conversations without appearing dominant. By letting others speak, they can assess intelligence, weaknesses, and hidden intentions. Story 74, when they have the self-control to only share a fraction of their whole knowledge according to what the listener is capable and willing to receive. When someone does the opposite by continue to blabber on without receptiveness to whether their listeners are listening and understanding so as to sound smart, then they likely know less than what they let on. I've sometimes gone undercover by pretending to not know about something that somebody else speaks knowledgeably about. They usually stop talking about it once they see that I can actually keep up with what they're saying instead of being confused or instead of getting lost in the details as I think they hope I would. But I'm like, no, keep going, LOL. Story 75, everyone is saying quiet people. But where I work, the smartest people are loud and talkative. They understand everything almost immediately. I sit there quiet and confused, and when I do ask questions to try to understand something, they act like I'm dumb or blow me off LOL. I can never keep up with them. Story 76. They avoid it. It gets meticulous answering questions or getting venom spat with words like, oh, you just love being right, every time there is a quarrel between them and another, especially by someone you trust and love, or even barely know and hear their loved ones saying it through the echo of a stranger. It becomes more of a task trying to conceal it rather than to set proper boundaries. They even miss out on some opportunities. But hey, they'd rather make friends, right? Because they stay, right? Eventually the family dies and the only people you would have around is you. And they can't do that if they're an asshole. So frustration is one common emotion they represent, or sheer buffoonery. Usually the former is in regards to absolute children of adults. No social cues, but plenty of time to learn what they need since all they do is study or get into a subject, while the other has those cues and tends to learn things at an unbelievably fast rate, sometimes even just by watching. Story 77. They act dumb or not concerned with smarts in front of their peers. I knew a guy like this in high school. Turns out he was valedictorian in the class ahead of me. I mean, he really laid it on thick. I really thought he was that dumb. I guess he didn't want people to put him on a pedestal or be intimidated by his intelligence. Story 78. They're extremely good at acting like a complete dumbass and have you convinced they're one. Most people don't bother someone stupid or feel less than someone smarter than them. They do this so you'll leave them alone and go ask the person who always answers in class for help or flexes their knowledge, making it easier for them to study on their own. After a while, you find out they get the highest grades, have an amazing job, and have tons of connections. If you've never found out they're smart, that means they did a very good job at hiding it. Of course, this is the roll of the dice because sometimes they're actually stupid. Ask them what they got on a test or quiz multiple times and have them show you what they got to be sure. To me, that's a key trait of someone smart, weaponized dumbassery. You'll be surprised how many people believe it. To convince someone something you're not takes a lot of intelligence and planning. Story 79. Comprehension of an idea or activity after a single observation. It clicks for them immediately. I've seen this in small children to senior citizens, and it invariably occurs in people who, in retrospect, have been highly intelligent. Truly gifted people need zero observations. Ideas are simply self-evident. Story 80. I don't want to toot my own horn, but I've been called intelligent, and all the other manners of praise related to it throughout my life. I think it's not exactly accurate because, in my opinion, intelligence in a personal sense should relate to being able to solve problems or demonstrate resolve where many would typically falter or stop. I'm not exactly the greatest at doing either, maybe slightly above average. What others have told me I'm intelligent for are typically things like having a lot of general knowledge about many topics and fields, giving very detailed explanations on things that your average person has very little knowledge about, providing solutions that are just derivatives or combinations of other solutions, stuff I felt was either obvious or just the logical, natural course one would take. I'm sure there's other things, but these are typically the most common. Coworkers come to me for solutions to problems or knowledge of topics. I don't think general knowledge means I'm intelligent but knowledgeable. Problem solving is something that I believe means intelligence. But just because I solve a few small problems doesn't mean I'm a grand tactician or something. Story 81. Honestly, I think that people who want you to know, think they're smart are the ones who will spout facts and statements about a topic. Those who are actually smart will be the ones asking questions and engaging with discussions instead. Story 82. They are a full-grown adult but use a small voice or present a meek, shy demeanor. Can apply to all genders. Whenever I encounter people intentionally using their physical attributes to portray a sort of "I'm just a baby" air about them that invites people to help them or give them a lot of grace leeway, they tend to be really MFN smart and probably need the least amount of help achieving the goal. I wouldn't call it full-blown manipulation, but there's truth, in my experience, that it is indeed always the quiet ones you have to watch out for. Story 83. They adopted their current religious opinion stance as an adult, and it's not the one they had as a kid. Whether or not you just so happen to think their views are completely full of shit, you have to admit they didn't take the easy option and just passively go along with what everyone else does. They spent a lot of time really thinking things over, and their old beliefs fell apart under scrutiny. Or maybe there just wasn't any room in their old worldview for something or other they came across or otherwise experienced. And they're not the kind of arrogant bastard who simply can't admit they were mistaken. Either way, stopping to say, hang on, does this actually work? And following through when it's not working are core pillars of the practice discipline that is being smart. Not that doing either of these things necessarily improves your cognitive function, but there's a reason we use the same word for a stubborn beast of burden or a stupid person. Refusing to actually use the tools you've been given tends to make one a dumbass. Another way in which that relentless desire to know manifests itself with the big asterisk that's simply returning to whatever you were raised to believe after an atheist phase doesn't count, because it's not really a change. Story 84. So smart people on here, any ideas on how to fix our global economic situation? Seriously seems like someone should come up with a better way to move stuff around so we can all survive. Like what message would it take to get everyone to listen and commit to working together? Team human sort of a deal. Does anyone else see all the countries and wonder why we aren't all trying to figure out the best possible government system? Best system for building society? Story 85, they're disciplined. I see most of these posts just describing curiosity or asking questions, which is the same thing, and they're not actually defining the intelligence of a more intelligent person. It reads more like masturbatory, wishful thinking. I wonder about a lot of things, so I must be smart too. It's bullshit. People that you perceive as more intelligent than you are, more disciplined than you are. I've met these people. They may be aware of the discipline, or they may be hyper-focused on a few things in life and unconcerned with the rest, creating a lifestyle that resembles discipline and its merits but isn't necessarily the same thing. I had a CEO who knew everyone's name, but what he really did was have his assistant figure up who was working that day and do a flashcard-style quiz session with him on each person, their info, and anyone recent or soon-to-be birthdays. This discipline shows he cares, whether it's about his employees or his own image, and to the regular folk it makes him seem brilliant, but he's just an average guy with a clever trick for controlling his own narrative. And that's where really disciplined humans exist. They are masterful at controlling your perception of them, their status, their competency, their likability, their memory, even their attitude. All of these things help weigh the scales of doubt and trust in their favor when shit hits the fan, and they can tiptoe through difficult situations on reputation and their charm. What looks like skill to you is actually hard work for many. A few have natural gifts and abilities and are unaware of their own status and persuasiveness, but many people exist who can read and study the way they affect others. I'd argue the more intelligent people are disciplined and capable of changing themselves, changing their behavior, their perspectives, without letting their ego get in their own way. From the outside looking in, you would never know, but these people are probably more akin to workaholics, though their skills can be used everywhere. They have a sort of love of the game for success in all its forms. Story 86, I would say certainty often makes someone look unintelligent to me. When someone is so sure of their beliefs or so sure what they're talking about is true. Someone who uses terms like perhaps, from my point of view, my understanding is, signifies that they're relaying what they think is true, but are aware of the possibility that they're wrong and are forthright in their willingness to be wrong and corrected. Story 87, using proper grammatical constructions in their speech just about all the time, even when in casual convo, letting big words slip into their sentences. If there's someone who's always offering insights or bits of trivia into random conversations, like always having been to a country that's brought up in saying, when I was there, or knowing all about the history of something you're discussing, they're probably well-educated. People who are well-educated tend to fit in well with all kinds of people because they're familiar with a little bit of everything. Really smart people tend to be creative, painting or writing or playing music or doing ballet or theater. All of these things are pursuits of the intelligent. People who really don't fit in with any one particular group and are loners have a tendency to be smart. Smart people always seem to get good grades, even when they don't study. Smart people many times are also the ones who drink the most, so the most drugs and generally are rebellious. They do it in order to try and fit in, but also because they're so miserable being as smart as they are, they try to dumb themselves down, usually to no avail. Generally, really smart prone are either very quiet, as they're always watching their surrounding, or they're boisterous and garrulous, trying to be the star, friends with everyone to fit in. Smart people are generally very friendly. As they're so unused to people who are nice to them, they approach every new meeting as a potential new addition to a very short list of friends. They're overachievers, they're self-abasing, they aren't very confident. There are other signs, I'm sure, but these just popped into my head and are the ones most obvious to me.